Next, on PJ Radio's The Unconventionals.
I think they breathed a sigh of relief when I was gone.
Because this guy who keeps bringing up, like, let's pay the workers more.
What's he talking
enough
about?
already.
We're not profitable enough to do that.
Yeah.
Profits first, and then we take care of people. I've always thought we've got to do them simultaneously, and that I would take 18% profit margin at the restaurant level versus 20, which is like the gold standard. I always thought 18% and doing the right thing is much better than 20 and not.
That opening voice is John Pepper, our guest on The Unconventionals today. John is founder and was CEO for 17 years of Boloco, a Boston-based burrito chain with 23 locations from Vermont to Washington, D.C. Wages in fast food are a big issue right now. National demonstrations in September were front-page news, with workers demanding $15 an hour. And at least in certain corners of the industry, think high-end chains like Shake Shack and Chipotle and In-N-Out Burger, companies are making real efforts to pay close to a living wage. Things were different in 1997 when John first started to question fast food compensation. Today's story is a little bit about Boloco, but it's mostly John's story and his efforts to create a very different kind of fast food business model. John parted ways with Boloco last year. And at one level, that's fine. The company has moved on without him, and for John, you'd have to say he went a long way towards achieving his vision. Earlier this year, the New York Times cited Boloco as a leader in frontline employee pay, with its median wage of $11.50 almost $3 higher than the national fast food average. But it's hard to call this a finished story. Unconventional, it turns out, isn't easy. And when you have a perspective that counters some age-old practices, like how you should pay your workers in a fast food company, you'll get some attention, but you also expose yourself to a lot of risk. In the beginning, there wasn't any big moral quest to change the industry. It was really about a kid in his 20s who loved the wraps he was eating in California and saw an opportunity to bring them to Boston.
At face value, for the average customer who's walking by, it's yet another burrito chain. And I would often tell people that I realized, unfortunately, way after I started the company, that the last thing the world really needs is another burrito chain, right? There's a lot of them out there, it turns out. So, but for me, it really started out as Boloco is what we really call ourselves as a globally inspired burrito chain. Okay, so
what does that mean?
Huge differentiation, which is so important, right?
Yeah.
No, what that means is that we take culinary traditions from all over the world, the best recipes, and we, instead of just being a Mexican play, we take global recipes and we wrap them into tortillas, which is the very best way to eat food, as I've come to believe over the last 20 years. So that's kind of what Boloco's product offering is in a nutshell. We do obviously salads and bowls and very fresh and delicious smoothies, shakes. So it's all good.
Yeah. So when you started Boloco, what was on your mind? Was it I just want to open up a restaurant? Did you have something bigger in mind?
No, not really. I mean, so, the quick story is I was in medical devices after college in the early 90s, and the company moved me out to San Francisco. And I always say that situation drove the rest of my career, because I became truly infatuated with burritos, the standard Mexican kind.
This is back at a time when they were not so big in Boston,
they barely
all over
existed.
the West Coast.
Honest Taqueria, I think, began in 93, so they're just starting. And do you know Honest Taqueria?
Yeah, I do.
So, I mean, the cousin, one of his cousins owns a taqueria in San Francisco, which my wife grew up on because she's from there. But anyway, long story short, I just was infatuated. I mean, I literally had a problem with burritos. And then this place opened up in the Marina District right near where I lived called World Wraps. And I often credit them for screwing up my whole life. But it
sounds like same inspiration globally.
It was, it was the rap phase, right? There was this rap craze that was going on. Anyway, I asked them to franchise. I was like 24 years old. This is right before I went back to business school. When I got to business school, I continued to think about that particular product. It wasn't about restaurants. It was about that particular product and how it was guaranteed in my mind to be successful, like whopping success story. Within a year, In-N-Out millionaires, right?
How could it not happen?
Right. Of course, I'm getting my MBA. How can I fail, right? So I opened during second year. I opened with my partners. Now, if it weren't for my partners, I wouldn't have been able to do it because we opened down here in Boston. I was up at Dartmouth again for getting my MBA. And we opened during my second year, and it was okay, like 50% worse than we thought. Okay. So, but the idea really was just a product play. The common bond my founders and I had was the product, our love for the product. One guy was from my hometown, Cincinnati, and the other guy was a friend of his from Boston University. So they were both, and he was from Boston. So that's what Boloco was in the beginning.
There's a honeymoon with any startup. The fast food honeymoon doesn't last very long. A lot of the day-to-day work is just a grind. And John had a big honking realization back in 1997 that fast food conventions, particularly the ones that guided how you treat employees, did not fit his vision for running a business. This big realization came when John was doing some of the hard stuff that is a fast food staple, cleaning his restaurant late at night.
We kind of got forced into trying to change the world. And here's why. It's very simple. I came out of medical devices. I used to spend a lot of time in hospitals. And I knew that what we were doing, I could wake up in the morning after even a bad day, a bad week, and I knew what we were doing mattered. I knew that we were helping patients, improve their quality of life. And in the burrito business, I was having trouble finding that same sort of level of purpose. And so what I ended up realizing, because I would close the restaurant at night, and I would open and I would clean. What I started realizing is this is super hard, right? It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. I'm expecting to get paid at some point for doing this, but we're paying nobody anything. I mean, we're doing, without thinking about it, we're just paying people as little as we can get away with it, right? That's the standard sort of philosophy of fast food.
That's the model, right?
That's the model, right? Now, people don't like it when you say that, but that's actually, we had fallen into that unknowingly, right? Subconsciously into that philosophy. And then where does it go? Like we would just sort of spit out the standard promise. We're going to take care of you. You'll get promoted, blah, 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 blah. And that still is out there. It's prevalent, right? The reality is different. Yes, it's true. There are stories of cooks going to CEOs and all that, but it's very rare. That's the whole dangling the carrot syndrome, though, which goes back to exactly what we do in the restaurant industry in general, which is we dangle carrots in front of employees and we tell them, do this, do this, do this, and you'll get a raise or you get a bonus, but the carrot moves. It always ends up moving. And it's a human characteristic. We dangle a carrot and we kind of move it because we're like, oh my God, we committed to paying all this out and we got to move that carrot because we can't pay out all that money. Right. At the end of the day, I realized fast food, where I could make a difference and why I could stick with this, other than having a 10-year lease that we realized we can't get out of when we were 50% down. That sort of affected us too. But we could change, we could try to improve and positively impact the lives of people who work in fast food. We could, if we could just do that, then maybe it would all be worth it. And we could do it through delicious burritos, which is pretty awesome. So that was very early. I mean, that was 97. We started in February. By late 97, this is when I look back at my journals, I was writing about this.
Still had one store at this point.
One store until early 98.
Okay, so you had this insight early on about how maybe you could do something different with the people who were making your burritos.
Yeah.
You had said something, John, though, that you just sort of fell into this industry standard, which is you just pay people as little as you can get away with. Where did that come from? So were you talking to consultants who knew the fast food industry and said, hey, here's the business model, you put as little into labor as possible, or where did it come from? It's just... Literally,
where's the minimum wage? And can you hire people for that? No. Okay, a little higher. Yes. Thank you. You're hired.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it goes. I mean, back then, minimum wage, I can't remember exactly. I think it was anywhere between $4.85 and $5.15. And we were, we had people usually at $5.50, $6, $7 was a stretch, well below livable wage.
Yeah.
But that was the deal. And that was the deal that started to feel pretty wrong. So, I mean, fast forward a couple years. In 2002, we made the decision, minimum wage is still $5.15. We were all over the board. It was like maybe whoever complained the most about their salary or their wage would get a little bit of a bump. But we moved every single person to $8 an hour minimum in the company. So it was a huge hit for a very brief period of time. And then that sailed into our best year that we'd ever had at that point. And a lot of that, I can't attribute it all to wages. I mean, that would be irresponsible to do. But what I can say is we then earned a higher share of their, we earned by doing that, a higher share of their, what they cared about in life. Because when you're getting paid too little, you're always basically look around to how to figure out how to get paid more.
Go somewhere else for a quarter an hour.
Yes, exactly like that, right? Now you've got people's attention a little bit. They're like, I'm not looking as hard. They might still be looking, but they're not looking as hard. And now you can start to build a culture that matters, where people care about each other, where they support each other, and where they take care of your guests, which leads to higher sales. And I still, to this day, many years later, look back at our long run of what's called same-store sales growth. Attributes to the way we treated people.
This was interesting. This early success in unilaterally raising wages to $8 an hour, and the important connection John started to see. Higher wages equal happier staff, which means happier customers and better year-over-year sales. With this early success, his instinct was to double down on this. Let's make this a core way of how we compete as a business. This is where John starts to hit snags with the board. As he reveals his plans, and one way John articulated those plans to me is that he wanted to have the highest wages in the fast food industry, it starts to sound a little like crazy talk to his investors and the board.
I think people, there were the people who knew, I mean, this is, to be totally honest, I had to wait for my experienced chief operating officer to leave the company to do it. I couldn't do it before that. This has happened a lot where...
Because he disagreed?
Yeah, because it's crazy. I mean, no, literally. I mean, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just because
this guy who keeps bringing up, let's pay the workers more.
Yeah, what's he talking about? We're not profitable enough to do that.
Yeah.
Profits first, and then we take care of people. I've always thought we've got to do them simultaneously, and that I would take 18% profit margin at the restaurant level versus 20, which is like the gold standard. If you can get to 20.
Yeah.
Like you're good to go. You're scaling all day long. I always thought 18% and doing the right thing is much better than 20 and not. I could sustain 18, and the profit margins and the returns to investors are great.
But your investors have to buy that.
They have to, and I think they sometimes were like, but you don't have all your restaurants doing 18%. I was like, we'll get there.
Because you're taking a bunch of profit off the table immediately by doing that.
Immediately. Yeah. And our job is to maximize profit, maximize shareholder return. By doing that, by definition, you're no longer doing that. You're doing something else. Now, if you have the long term in mind, my theory was, in the long run, we'll have far higher profits, more restaurants, and whatever profit we do have, I'll call high quality profit. As opposed to not all profit is made equal, right? If you've got a certain level of profitability, but one company has very well taken care of employees and the other doesn't, that's sort of like saying, well, we have high quality food and we have crappy food.
Yeah. Meaning it's more sustainable potentially.
More sustainable.
You feel better about it.
Everybody feels better about it. Customers over time feel better about it.
So you had to wait for your chief operating officer to leave because he thought it was crazy. So it wasn't like everybody was completely on board excited about this.
No, it's always been a struggle right up until the last day I was at Boloco, right? So I left the company 11 months ago as its CEO for 17 years. But I remember a board meeting not more than 2 years ago where I made a very formal presentation to the board, which I never do. I'm usually seat of the pants. But I read this proposal. And my goal that year was late 2011. My goal in 2012 was to conveniently have the average wage at Boloco be 12. So it was $12 an hour. So it was 12 and 12. And what I didn't share is my real goal was to get to 15, ironically, given all the $15 an hour protests.
It's a big thing nationally now. Yeah.
Totally, right? It was to get to $15 an hour by 2015. Not because I was going to give it away, but because I was sure in my mind that we would have outsized performance gains over that period of time while we did that. I thought that would give us such an edge over the best people. People would clamor to not leave, and you'd be well above livable wage at that point. And now you'd be really talking about a seriously different fast food business. My proposal was rejected at that dinner.
You're 12 for 2012, $12 an hour for 2012.
No CEO should ever, this is the quote, no CEO should ever be given incentive to increase wages. End quote. That was it.
And your proposal was part of that your performance would be based in part on.
I gave back, so I had been given my bonus plan for the year, and what I did is I say I'll accomplish everything. Thank you for this generous bonus opportunity, but what I would like to do is I will accomplish everything that's been laid out, right, for 100% of the objectives, but I'll only get 50% of the bonus for that. If in addition to those objectives, right, I can get at the same time, so achieving the objectives, but at $12 an hour average, so do both, then I'll take 100% of the bonus. I don't know if I got a bonus at all that following year, but but I didn't get to 12 either. Anyway, I looked at that, and I don't blame anybody for that. It's a very reasonable, standard business response. But you're not going to get anywhere interesting in a business that's really where our whole mission is to positively impact the lives and futures of our people through bold and inspired food and practices. We are no longer in the bold practices category at this point. We're in the
do what the rest of the industry does.
Do what everybody else does.
Yeah.
Stay a little bit above, but don't go too far.
Coming up, we'll hear how Unconventional cost John his job. It wasn't just about the hourly wages, though that was a public high-stakes issue that had to contribute. It became clear to John, and apparently the board, that they didn't see eye to eye on how to run the company any longer. And what do you do when you find out, without any warning, that you're out of the company you ran for 17 years? Well, in John's case, you become an Uber driver.
You're listening to PJ Radio's The Unconventionals. If you'd like to learn more about the show or join in on the conversation, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/unconventionalsradio. Our academic sponsor for The Unconventionals is a Center on Global Brand Leadership at Columbia Business School, which turns the research of academia's foremost thinkers on branding into practical tools and insight for real-world application. For more information, visit globalbrands.org.
Welcome back. I'm Mike O'Toole, and this is The Unconventionals. We're talking to John Pepper about his 17-year run at the burrito chain Boloco, a run that ended abruptly about a year ago. John's approach to the business model, which was almost the exact opposite of the pay people as little as you can above minimum wage convention of the mainstream fast food industry, created tension with a board and investors that were looking for a more traditional way to scale. As is often the case, money tends to be a forcing factor. It all came to a head around a deal for financing to grow the business.
I think they breathed a sigh of relief when I was gone. I will say that stress levels increased as the stakes got a little bit higher, and for me personally, especially. Tensions where it really got challenging, I think, and just with control partners, as you would call our investors, who I've always liked very much, by the way, and supported our business in difficult times as well. We decided to start really focusing on opening in a second market, Washington, D.C. being the ultimate choice through a bunch of data, which I never used to do any data. It was all, I like that site. Let's do it. And, mostly we got lucky. But I think I remember bringing up succession, at least in the car. I had just spoken at a conference in California, and this is at least 3 years ago, where I started to say, it'd be responsible for me to make sure that I'm the right person to run this going forward and to scale it from 16, 18, 20 to 50 units, right? We knew we were going to have to bring in more big capital to do that. And I figured I could probably get us to that point. It was often reinforced that I was the right person to lead it. In the back of my mind, all of us have these times in our life, right, where you're hearing those things, but in your own mind, you're like, maybe they're wrong. Maybe I'm right and I'm not the right person.
Yep.
Nonetheless, this is my baby. I'm not leaving it
easily.
No. So so we kept plugging away, and I often was trying to figure out how to gain more skills, to be a better leader, and to build a better company. And we ended up deciding in 2012 that it was time to think about raising more capital, a big round of capital. We ended up getting one pretty large investment proposal kind of over the transom in 2012, which was, and this is where the tensions began, which was blocked. I actually really thought we should do it. And I stood alone on the board. And so that led to a high level of tension where we all agreed we had to go raise money, but it was going to be under sort of revised terms. So 2013, we ended up, going through a real process. And this is about helping Boloco go from 22 to 60 or 70 units over the next 3 to 4 years, 4 different markets. I was excited about that. And the reason I left Boloco in the end is we actually unanimously agreed on a deal. And unfortunately, at the 11th and a half hour, the deal was still there, but we again rejected the deal. We internally. I didn't. I ultimately said, number one, here's the deal, guys. This is 17 years. And number one is we do this $15 million deal, which is everything to this business. Everything. Duh. Number two, put an alternative in front of us that makes sense, a fraction of that money, but some. Or number three, you have my resignation for what's called good reason.
What was wrong with the $15 million offer?
It was a change of control. If you're a control investor and that's your mandate, that makes it very hard to relinquish control when push comes to shove. So it wasn't that it seemed that hard prior to signing the deal. It was as you go through due diligence, which is usually not so fun. People aren't loving each other, when they're negotiating things that to most people don't make any sense or matter, but they matter in these cases. And I think you just get cold feet, change your mind. They've got their own objectives they've got to achieve as a fund. And so they chose 3 in the end.
Say goodbye to John.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But, we're done here.
Is it fair at all to connect this provocative, disruptive mission around paying workers more with your eventual departure from the company, or is that not really?
I don't know. I can't put a direct correlation. I would say it's just one of the components that would make a board of directors question, do we have the right leader? Do we have the right guy in place? Is there enough balance? One of my board members, who is such a great guy, leads a very large restaurant chain. He would always say, John, you've got to be balanced, right? You've got to find a balance in doing the things that I think they sound good, but you've also got, other real responsibilities. And the question is well, how can we all agree on the balance? That's the hard part. Balance is just in the eyes of the beholder. So.
Yeah. John would have to find that balance somewhere else. In the meantime, he had the luxury of a little time to think. He spent some of that driving for Uber. Clearly, a large part was about getting far away from his CEO responsibilities. But his time at Uber also gave him perspective on what his next move might be.
Well, the first thing I did is I took a walk around Chicago, right, which is where I had my final meeting. I
great city, worst places to walk.
Right. I ate in a restaurant that I think I blogged about or something, and then I got the next morning. I tapped for my Uber car, and I'll never forget this Uber driver because he sent me on a new mission very quickly. So the first day that I left. The first day after I left Boloco, in that cab ride on the way to O'Hare, I signed up to be an Uber driver. Because this guy, Shabi, his name was so thrilled with his new job that by the time I said, you know what I should do? Because today is the first day of the rest of my life, I should become an Uber driver. And he said, if you do, I get $250. And I was like, you know what? Done. I'm doing that. What's your name?
Shabi.
Shabi.
Yes.
So you are the man in charge of making me Uber driver. If
you give me my phone number and name, you'll get 250. I'll get 250.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
As a reference.
I will do that. Hold on. Let me make sure I get your name before we're done.
My name.
But I want it to be recorded that I may have applied for Uber on the way to O'Hare. How do you say your name again?
Shabi.
Shabi.
Or not to be.
Or not to be. Okay. All right.
It's starting.
Okay. So, you want to get me? Now, I am getting ready to go on my first Uber ride. We got to get this right. I want to get a 5-star, right?
Right.
So, let's put this up here. We'll put that like that. How perfect is that, huh? They give you this free? It's pretty cool. Okay. Now, Tibby, the minute this thing shows that I get my first customer. Get off that. You have to get out of the car fast.
I will.
All right, you ready?
Ready.
Here we go.
All right.
Boom. Okay. Go online.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh. Where is that?
It's in.
Should I accept it?
No, don't.
I don't know where it is. You? Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Here we go.
Wow, this is scary.
This is.
This is the real deal.
Okay.
Dude,
Harvard
I'm gonna
Street.
take it. I'm gonna take it.
Click on it.
You're out of here, Daddy.
Oh my God. Okay, bye, Daddy.
Okay. Mwah. Love you. Okay. This is very scary. Bye. Bye. I'm scared. And so that led to a really cool, I guess I'll call it social experiment, where I actually got paid $29.98 an hour, which is a
Pretty good wage.
pretty good wage.
Yeah.
And I was being super efficient. I'd drive my kids to school and try to Uber my way home. My wife would sometimes, she called me once. She's like, would you please stop Ubering and come home? And it was like 3:00 in the afternoon. But I learned a lot about being the driver, essentially a taxi driver. I learned a lot. I had 2 different cars I used. One was a very nice car. One was a Jeep Wrangler, which I think is very nice too, but you get treated very differently. And it gave me a sense, and it also was interesting to get rated and get evaluated every single ride. And I was very curious how that felt, and could it somehow be applied to other businesses, and specifically the business I know best, which is the restaurant business. And could that be a way, could technology help restaurant workers?
Your Uber experience is interesting because, a lot of us have adopted Uber. I mean, why not adopt it? And I universally, when I chat up drivers, they are enthusiastic about the experience.
Yeah.
And they may not say it's perfect, but it's not like a cab driver who, first of all, maybe doesn't want to talk to you. And if they do, they're not going to entertain that kind of conversation.
No, usually not.
So there is something about that connection between how Uber has figured out how to empower and compensate drivers and the customer experience, which is, I
Right.
think, that connection you were making at Boloco.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did you learn? Tell me some stories about your Uber driving days.
Well, I think what I learned was this. Uber could have begun like most of us start businesses that exist already. So what Uber does kind of almost exists, right? They could have said, all right, we're going to go and we're going to call the cab companies and we're going to integrate with them, and we're going to go and call the Boston Coaches of the world for black car service, and we're going to integrate with them. And then, we're going to have a process where every few months some manager dude rides in the front seat and, kind of checks off a bunch of boxes. And then maybe the driver gets some sort of a bonus or a raise, and it's kind of arbitrary based on that one ride. What I realized is that they just short-circuited all of that. And they built something, and the reason it's disruptive is because they kind of just went around the existing structure. And to make real change, now whether Uber is successful over time or not, I mean, San Francisco right now is just fighting. I mean, San Francisco, where they're based, is really fighting them and Lyft.
It's the biggest battleground for.
Totally. Yeah. And it's happening in a lot of cities are just like, no.
Yep.
But so you gotta understand that. But what I did learn is when I'm thinking about changing the lives of restaurant employees, I have to think totally differently. I have to think around the infrastructure that's in there now, if that makes any sense. I have to be aware of the fact that there's a possibility of not getting all bogged down by what exists.
We're living in a time where people are asking fresh questions about the fast food business, about food quality, and about labor practices. And this attention is good for all of us. As Eric Schlosser said in Fast Food Nation, there's nothing inevitable about the fast food nation that surrounds us, about its marketing strategies, labor policies, and agricultural techniques, about its relentless drive for conformity and cheapness. John deserves credit as an early questioner, but it's his broader perspective, which is not just about wages, but about how rethinking the role of frontline workers can reshape all the other parts of the business that has the potential to drive deeper innovation.
Well, first of all, whatever I do, I've got to immensely enjoy the core product or service or whatever it is, right? I considered joining a couple companies at one point. I think at the end of the day, I probably have to do my own thing. I love the restaurant business for different reasons than most people love the restaurant business. I love being a customer of restaurants for the food, but I really still think there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to taking care of people who are in low wage income positions.
So how do you do that?
Well, I think first of all, you have to slowly but surely start providing real evidence that taking better care of people will result in at least equal, but perhaps better performance. It's going to be very hard to convince people
to take a hit for that.
To take a hit, right? I mean, people struggle anyway. As minimum wage gets raised in this country, there will be businesses that fail because of it. Now, I believe they shouldn't be in business in the first place, right? They're not paying their bills. Their bills being their employees.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the definition of a failing business. So I do think that there are, just thinking very differently about this, there are opportunities where technology can play a part in accomplishing, I guess, a better transparency for the value of people who are currently in what I'll call low-income positions. We are right now, why we're scared of paying people more is because we don't know what they're worth. We don't have any real metrics to figure out, like, is this person worth 12 or 14 or 18 bucks an hour? If you knew someone was worth 18 bucks an hour, but you only had to pay him 16, you would hit that arbitrage opportunity all day long. They're happy, you're happy. The problem is we basically look at everybody just as an expense.
And everybody's a $10 an hour employee or $8 an hour employee, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, so, the woman I spoke to when I checked out of my New Orleans hotel yesterday, she makes $10 an hour. At the end of this year, she expects that hopefully she'll get a 15-cent raise. She's been doing it there for, 9 years. And I said, are you okay with that? She's like, I don't know what else to say about it. That's the deal. I said, is it working? She's like, oh no. So we gotta find a way to figure out what is she really worth. If you're paying your best people and your worst people kind of the same because everybody's scared to do anything, and that's not working. There's got to be a way to separate the people who care, who are committed, who want to be part of, a culture and a business that matters. And so, yeah, it's going to leave, my idea is it'll leave some people who really don't care. It'll leave them behind probably, but it'll also help people who care get ahead. And I feel like that's where we need to be.
I'm Mike O'Toole, and this is the Unconventionals. Thanks to John Pepper for a great, candid conversation about his 17-year ride at Boloco. We're looking forward to his next move. We're always on the hunt for great stories of disruptive brands, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on Facebook at facebook.com/unconventionalsradio. Join us next time as we begin a 2-part dive into the craft beer industry. We'll take a look at this disruptive industry by talking to Tony McGee, CEO of Lagunitas, one of the most iconic and ambitious craft brewers in the country.
The Unconventionals is written and produced by Mike O'Toole and Reed Mangan. Post-production and technical direction by Reed Mangan with Anthony Gentles. Promotion and social strategy by Greg Straface and Graham Spector. Our creative director is Aaron De Silva. Our executive producer is Phil Johnson for PJA Advertising and Marketing. I'm Jafia Leahy. To hear more episodes of The Unconventionals, visit pjaradio.com.
This is PJA Radio.